Good evening. Oh, this is so exciting. Welcome to Positively Positive. And I'm Susan Mintz, your hostess. Um, I just have to put a few things out there about this show. We are really getting people in from all over the country telling their stories. This show is all about HIV, whether it's personal, impersonally, or an organization, doesn't matter. But people want to tell their stories. In Arizona, New York, DC, and today's guest, Michael Luciano, he's from Charleston, South Carolina. It is so exciting. You want to say, tell your story. You don't always know how. Go on to Positively Positive and tell us your story. We are doing groundbreaking storytelling shows about HIV. No one else is doing it. And there are going to be glitches. Storms come through and I get dropped. We're all remote. My producer, Richardo Jackson at Campbell Health Solutions, he's in West Palm Beach. My guest today is from Charleston. I'm in Boca. We are remote. This is not the huge mega studio where everything's perfect and my guest is sitting next to me. Not yet. But we tell stories about life. We deal with glitches. If we fall off, we got to get back on again. Or if my guest has, we deal with it. We keep talking and we tell stories because you matter. So if you don't have the patience to go, the screen might go blank for 2 minutes, but we will be back. But the information you will get by the end of our story will maybe change your life, save your life. So if you want to tell your story, go to Positively Positive and Susan Mintz or Richardo Jackson at Campbell Health Solutions. My story is on my website. I don't want to even take the time anymore. My story is on susanmintz.com in my books, which I document and tell stories. My book called Committed to Love is my personal journey with my love of my life, Dr. Jeffrey Mintz, who passed away from AIDS-related pneumonia in 1994. I journaled his entire illness with my life, and I wrote it in a book called Committed to Love. I did hospice 11th hour volunteer work for 6 years. I wrote their stories. I'm a storyteller. I don't do anything but reality, and this is reality. So all I say is my books are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Amazon is the best. They're $22.95 each, and both books could save your life, help you through issues. Doesn't, even if it's not HIV, perhaps it's a long-term illness with something else. I deal with issues, fear, love, passion, compassion, disruption, instability, but they're all full of hope and faith and love and being positively positive. So please check out the books on my book page and on my website, and feel free to make an investment in a marvelous, marvelous journey with me. Just like today, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about my guest. And when the glasses come off and the makeup comes on, I always want to say, Tammy Baker, eat your heart out, except for the eyelashes. My guest today is Michael Luciano. And he had on his Facebook page, his profile, silence equals death. I want to tell him about how that caught my eye, about something that I have personally seen. And then the other thing is, I want to know how a boy from New York, who went from studying anthropology and getting a degree in chemical engineering, I mean, he's smart. So I want to say, come on in, Michael Luciano. Come into the studio. It's your time. Come on in, Michael. Hello, my friend.
Good morning, Susan.
Good morning. It is a little dark where you are yet, but it'll work out just fine. When I saw your silence equals death profile, I was down at the World AIDS Museum, and that's where I saw that sign. And I actually took a picture of it, and I've posted it many times on my Facebook page when it was around World AIDS Day or a National HIV Testing Day. And I thought it was so interesting. And then when I went through your bio, I absolutely could not believe everything I read. And some people wonder why I look down. I take notes on my guests. You are precious. You're a valuable commodity to me right now. And at the end of the year, when I've done a year of these, I'm going to write a book called Positively Positive, and your story will be in it. So, yes, I look down, and yes, I write notes, but that's because my guests have something to contribute that is so incredible. So, welcome in and tell me about why you picked Silence Equals Death as your profile page, since that's what caught my eye.
Um, hmm. Well, that slogan came from ACT UP New York, of course. Um, the radical direct action advocacy group that I was swept up into in the early 90s in New York, which is where I was born and raised. And spent the first 2/3 of my life, I guess. Um, and I think it's as true today as it was in the late 80s and early 90s when that slogan first came up. At that time, activism came out of a place of true desperation.
Yes.
I mean, people were dying left and right, and I spent too long going to funeral after funeral after funeral,
Yes.
and begging for attention to the AIDS crisis, and the group took that as their motto. As a call to action and a call to refuse to be silenced and put in a corner or quietly die and make it easy for everyone.
Yes.
And I think that's just as true today as it was then.
It is, Michael, and that's the sadness of it all. Why this show, no matter what happens, is going to be breaking ground, and it is groundbreaking because many of us have been involved with this since 1981. I lost my whole area in Houston where we lived. I watched my husband of 25 years, who was promiscuous, a bisexual, go through it and pass away. So I knew that this was the call on my life. But when I saw the sign equal death, I'm glad you brought up the ACT UP and all of it, the slogan, because it is true today. And I firmly, firmly believe that this show will take stories to the nation. And then at some point, people are going to understand why people who are involved with HIV are so passionate, because we have gone to more funerals than weddings or bar mitzvahs.
Yes.
And now the other thing is, well, if we got that going. The other thing I want to know is, how did you go from anthropology and chemical engineering to Charleston, South Carolina, and be what you are today and do all these board chairs? And I mean, it's amazing. That's what I'm saying. I have to read on my phone sometimes people's bios, because when I take notes, I realize I've gone through a page of notes that I can't even read. Tell me a little bit about how you made the journey from New York to being an activist in Charleston, South Carolina, who is my first Charleston Carolinian.
Well, as I said, I was born and raised in New York and lived for many years, probably the majority of my adult life in New York. I lived in the East Village, which was a hotbed of queer culture and AIDS activism.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2001, I was struggling financially. I was living on disability at the time. My partner was also struggling financially. He was a graphic designer who had worked for mainly for investment banks. And after 2001, they, after 9/11 specifically,
Mm-hmm.
all the investment banks stopped using outside contractors and were using only in-house staff. So he was struggling financially also. And his health was really beginning to fail at that point due to AIDS-related issues. So we left New York City. We were in California for a brief time, but couldn't make that work financially. And we ended up in Jacksonville, Florida, which is where he was born and raised, and his family is from and still there. He really wanted to reconnect with his family as his health was failing. So we ended up in Jacksonville, Florida, and he was able to get to know his siblings, who were all 10 to 14 years younger than him.
Sure.
And he hadn't known them as adults. So he was able to reconnect with them. But unfortunately, his health worsened. And he did pass away in early 2003 from repeated pneumonia infections, not classic AIDS pneumonia, but his immune system had collapsed and he could just no longer fight it. So he passed away in January of 2003. I had a friend from New York, a longtime friend who had been living here in Charleston for 8 or 9 years at that point. And my friend here in Charleston needed a housemate at just the right moment when I was ready to get out of Jacksonville, but couldn't afford to go back to New York. So I moved here to Charleston and discovered that I liked it a whole lot better than Jacksonville. No offense to anyone in Jacksonville. As a native New Yorker, it just didn't work for me. And it was, touched by such grief and strife. The last 2 years of Bill's life were really very, very difficult. And I spent almost my entire time there nursing him.
Our stories are so similar. That's the other thing that caught my eye, because I do my research on people. I'm very thorough. That was Jeffrey's issue when he contracted it in 92. He had 3 battles with the AIDS-related pneumonia, and he was really gravely ill when it first one happened, and he managed to get up to a certain level, but you never get back up. Not then. And then another, and at the third time, he just said no more, and that's when we called hospice in. But you then know personally love and loss very deeply in your heart. And I think with HIV, as with anything, this show could be about Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, any long-term illness, cancer. This happens to be a show about HIV. But this could be, if you take that component out, there's love, compassion, enthusiasm, activism. When you take on a cause that's hit your life, you don't do it just for a little bit. You throw yourself into it. And no matter what happens, you're purposed for it. I'm purposed for where I am in my life. You are purposed to have silence equals death. So I could meet you and you could tell your story. Everything is so planned. We just have to choose whether we want to go with it or not. And now tell me what you're doing recently, or back up when you first went to Charleston, because I'm looking down now because I see where you were an HIV treatment activist, co-chair and support services committee, treatment educator. Give me a lot now about your background, how you started in Charleston and the different things you've done.
Well, when I arrived here in Charleston, I immediately connected to medical care and case management services before I moved here, in preparation for the move. And when I got here, I discovered that my medical providers and my case managers were shocked by the fact that I had lined that all up in advance. And, and moved here with months worth of medication just in case there was any glitch connecting to care, a sheaf of medical records 10 miles high, etc. And they seemed so surprised to have someone so well prepared to engage in their own care. And I said, well, shouldn't everybody do that?
That's wonderful. Wait, let me tell you something. When I read that you were a chemical engineer and studied anthropology, my head started spinning and saying, this guy is organized. I won't say OCD, except I could wear a sign that says OCD. I'm damn proud of it. But I knew from your background just a little bit. I said, this guy's got an A, B, C, D. There's no A to C and D. The guy is super structured. So they were impressed and wondered why. I say the same thing. Why shouldn't it? Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I don't know that I'm as organized as I might project, but I do try to be. And, it was shocking to me that other people didn't engage in care in that way. I knew it, but it seemed shocking to me that no one else was doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually I started asking and kept asking, well, I have years of experience as a treatment activist, and I'd be happy to help teach your other clients and your other patients how to come into care and how to engage in care in the same sort of way. And initially, I volunteered at the agency which provided my case management, but was just doing sort of office mate work initially. And luckily for me, a new program director was hired in 2010 who understood the value of having someone living with HIV teaching other people living with HIV how to engage in care and how to really fully get the best out of their providers' relationships and their case management relationships. And so I got more and more deeply involved. I wrote an HIV self-management program to be presented, initially just to be presented to brand new diagnosed, those who had just tested positive. We eventually started presenting that to any client of the agency who would come for the program, because after doing adherence counseling and meeting with a number of clients, I realized I had clients who had been positive for 5, even 10, 15 years and still didn't really understand the basics and didn't understand how to engage in care and had never been taught that. So we expanded that program, and eventually I was facilitating support groups, presenting HIV self-management, presenting a prevention intervention called Healthy Relationships, which is a CDC-sponsored prevention with positives program, and it just steamrolled on and on from there.
That's great. Isn't it amazing how, if you are in your purpose or your passion, how things will come along? And I think, when people expect perfect, this has been going, I was in prayer this morning, and the word perfect kept coming into my head because I am a perfectionist and I will always try to be better. I'm not perfect, but I try. And I kept saying, I wanted to tell people that if you expect perfect, you will miss the opportunities, because part of doing something you love and taking it on with a passion is, it's not going to be perfect because another door is going to open. It might not be perfect. This show gets dropped, things happen, but it's another door to open. Did I want it? Yes. That's what you do in life. If it's your thing, don't hesitate. Open the door that comes along. It may not be perfect. Nothing in life is. So
No.
don't expect perfect, because the only thing that'll do is hold you back from being what you're supposed to be, or the shoulda, coulda, would is, and all that people grow old with. Go for it. Oh, I'm so happy to hear what you're doing, because you truly have mentored and gotten active in what you do. So pick it up, because you're board chairs, but you're a great teacher. I can see you with clients though a lot, educating and teaching and motivating, but just compassion. You have tremendous compassion as well as information, because you've been to the battlefield.
I have both personally and for those,
Yeah,
around me.
right.
Uh, you know, before my career path was derailed by being terribly sick and terribly broke in the mid 90s, my intention I was pursuing a PhD in cultural anthropology, and my intention was to teach at the college level. And this is just life threw a complete wrench in that. I never did finish my PhD, but what I do now is still education, and it's still very much just a redirection of that. And that's just like you were saying about forget the perfect and strive for it, but accept that nothing's gonna be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So this this career path is very much just a redirection of where I had seen myself before I became so terribly ill, back in really the early 90s. I was on disability for many years, from 1994 until 2007. And initially here in Charleston, 2017, sorry. Initially, much of what I did at the agency where I now work was as a volunteer. And then I was being paid small amounts as a contractor so that it wouldn't interfere with retaining my disability income and my Medicare coverage. And it took quite a long time, but I managed to convince DHEC, our Department of Health here in South Carolina, to create paid positions at Ryan White B agencies throughout the state, for people living with HIV, to mentor others living with HIV and to provide support and education for others living with HIV, because no one can teach you how to learn to take that one pill once a day that sounds so very simple and is not so very simple. No one can teach that to you like another person who's been through it.
Oh, yeah. Michael, what I want to ask them, what medication? I always like to know the medications people are on, because they've improved so. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, there's no cure yet, though. I firmly believe one day there'll be a shot for that also, like they've got everything else. Maybe not a cure, but the medications today are so phenomenal if a person can tolerate them and afford them and has the access to them. So, what medication are you on, and how do you feel?
Overall, I feel pretty damn good. Certainly compared to the early and mid 90s, I feel amazingly good. And I currently take Prezista boosted with Norvir,
Okay.
plus dolutegravir and doravirine or Pifaltrip. So I'm still on 3 separate medications. I can't get away with one pill once a day because of my exposure to the older meds. But that combination is incredibly effective for me.
That's
And
wonderful.
it's relatively simple. I mean, it is 6 pills a day, and it's twice a day. But compared to, my first regimen, I think was 28 pills a day, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting, again, talking about, I'm so glad you brought it. I ask about meds because a lot of times when the guests talk about the number of meds they've had to take, and it allows me to, a little bit elaborate. When Jeff was diagnosed, my husband hated to take pills. It wouldn't have mattered if it was on baby aspirin, he would choke. So when this came along and they had him on AZT and they had him on Mepron and stuff, but these big horse pills, and he couldn't get them down. So the only way I would be able to do it was and we were so health conscious with our diet. I mean, I was an amazing cook and we loved to eat, and he was really healthy, except, he had AIDS. But the thing was to get him to eat the things I did that I would never have done before. I was putting Snickers candy bars in the morning when they had the nuts already. I'd be sticking the pills in the candy bar. So he'd literally be eating a candy bar for breakfast to get the 3 horse pills down. And then there would be butter and all the things. I thought to myself, I had never done any of this, but to get him to stay alive and to get him to do what he needed to do, you do it. Isn't it amazing, Michael, what you can do when you have to do it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But things are so much easier today for myself. And, the majority of my patients are on a 1 pill once a day regimen, which, it is amazing. And it's incredibly effective. It's incredibly flexible. It's incredibly forgiving, unlike the older meds.
Yeah.
And the great part of my job is that I do get to see so many of my clients succeed and return to health or maintain their health. And we have these amazing meds.
Do you still do testing though? Are you still active in the testing area as well as the educating area and mentoring, but you do testing too?
I don't any longer. The last time I did a test was probably 5 or 6 years ago now.
Okay.
I did used to do testing. At this point, I am so thoroughly engaged and sometimes overwhelmed on the treatment side that I don't run the actual tests. I also have some pretty severe arthritis in my right hand, so I don't really want to be sticking anyone's finger these days. And I certainly don't want to be drawing blood anymore.
Of all the things you've done, literally, I mean, co-chair and support groups on the HIV treatment activity, study, of all the things that you have done, what would you say, even now, what's the most rewarding part of even being HIV positive and the condition you're in? What is your motivation though? What keeps you positive? Why is being positively positive? What was the most important part on your journey so far that kept you where you are and what you're doing? Because that's what I like to know about.
First of all, I have to say I absolutely love the name of the show because there's no good reason these days not to be positive about being positive. Like I said, we have these incredibly effective medications. We can practically guarantee treatment availability to almost anyone who does test positive or who is living with HIV. And that's the best part and the motivating factor for me is that we really have come a universe away from where we started with treating HIV. And we can keep people healthy or restore their health and keep people alive and well to see the day when there will be an HIV cure. And I'm convinced that there will be. We know it's not going to be tomorrow or next year. I don't know. I doubt it will be 5 years from now, but maybe 10 years from now. And certainly, I will say I am absolutely convinced that in the future, we will be able to cure HIV. And I want
I want to ask you another question then. How is the Charleston, South Carolina? Because I've never interviewed anybody from there. It's so exciting for me to have these people coming from all over the country, not always just from Palm Beach County or West Palm Beach. I'm in Boca, and my producer's in West Palm. You're in Charleston. How is the Charleston community with the health department and the access to the Ryan Whites? How is that? How is that in Charleston? Is there an active? Is it a health department that's really got its act together?
There are some great folks in the health department, and I've built and other advocates and activists in the state, I hardly am alone in that, have built some great relationships with the people at our department. And the division of HIV and STI services has some really great folks in the department. So we've collaborate well, and I will say that South Carolina's ADAP program, the AIDS Drug Assistance Program, is much stronger and much more generous in a way than most of our immediate neighbors. South Carolina really stands out that way. We have a very high income cutoff limit. So we can guarantee treatment to almost anyone.
That's wonderful.
You know, we could use more money for Ryan White services, as everyone could. And the agency I work with, you know, we struggle to be able to provide enough services for our clients. But you know, we are in pretty good shape compared to many of our neighbors here in the Deep South.
And you know, Michael, what's interesting about everything is I've learned so much about where people live, the access they have, because in some rural areas, as with other issues, the rural or the people who are less fortunate or don't even have a health department that might be 2 hours away. It's very challenging for a lot of people to have the health care in general that they need, especially when it's something like, you know, HIV. And that hurts me so much when there are areas in this country that don't have the access or the funding or the ability to even get what they need. And there are many areas in this country that don't. So Charleston's in good. West Palm Beach is more of a Palm Beach County is very proactive. We have the HIV Care Council, all organizations all over the place, but there's always a need for more money. Like you just said, they'll cut resources for support groups. They'll cut the government wants military. They don't want you. But in general, you feel very good that your clients are getting the services in Charleston they need.
In general, yes. You know, we have South Carolina was designated as a priority 1 jurisdiction in the national and the HIV epidemic program that was created under the Trump administration, surprisingly enough. And it was designated as a priority 1 jurisdiction specifically because of the extent of the rural epidemic in South Carolina. I mean, when you travel outside of our 3 big metros, are Charleston, Columbia, and Greenville, South Carolina. And as soon as you're outside the city metro areas, you're in very rural territory. So we do still struggle with that. Even my agency provides services for a tri-county area, and the far reaches of that tri-county area are very much rural. So we do have challenges with transportation,
Yeah.
for sure. It can be very difficult to get some of our farther flung clients into our medical clinic or in for an appointment with their case manager. And even staying in touch with them can be really challenging. So
Another thing, another
it
thing
is a
is
challenge, but
another thing, a big issue even here in Palm Beach County with all the resources we have, and it's a tremendous amount of money, not that necessarily it's going to the health department or organizations, but transportation is a big, and housing. And those are two interests that I'm very involved in: dental care, housing, and transportation, because oral health is so important. So for me, you have a dentist in the health department.
we do not have a dentist in the health department. Um, the agency where I work does have partnerships or memoranda of understanding with several dental practices
Okay.
in the area. We also have a dental school. The Charleston is the home of the Medical University of South Carolina.
Right.
And the medical university does have a dental school where we refer people as well. It is a challenge though, because there is no real public transportation here. I mean, there are some bus routes in Charleston itself and in North Charleston, which is where I'm located. But compared, when I was a kid growing up in the late 60s and early 70s, I never, ever thought I would say, oh God, I miss the subways. But I miss the subways.
Yeah.
I miss the really effective public transportation that I had in New York City.
Yeah.
Because transportation is a challenge even here in Charleston, much less in our outlying areas.
Right. And what about housing in general too? Do you have an availability where you have clients that can get into apartments or housing, or how is that situation? Because we need housing and transportation and dental even where we are. There'll never be enough.
There indeed will never be enough. Charleston is in a big boom period. There's a lot of industry that has moved here. There are
Yes.
there's a huge population growth year after year after year for the past 10 years.
Right.
So housing has become a crisis issue. Actually, the cost of rental housing has gone through the roof here. It's well above the national average in increases in the price of housing. Forget buying a house. To buy a house in Charleston, I mean, you're essentially looking at a minimum of $300,000 or $400,000 for a tiny house.
Yeah, easily.
And up into the millions.
Yeah.
But rental housing has also now gone through the roof. So that is a crisis area for us, and it's a real struggle.
And you're still you are with the health department, right? Though that's where you are basically do your work.
No, I work for a relatively small nonprofit agency. It is an ASO, an AIDS service organization in the classic model of that. We do now own and operate a medical clinic, but we are not an FQHC, a federally qualified healthcare center, and don't want to be, because that would take our focus away from HIV.
Right.
So the agency where I work, it's an independent community-based organization. We work with the health department. Sometimes we fight with the health department. But it's an independent organization.
Yeah. And in general, do you have a partner now, or did you just, or you went real dark? Go back again. Go back. You went real dark. There you are. I got you back.
That's
Um,
better.
do you have a partner now, or was losing someone one time enough? How does that work for you personally? And just back up a tad more. There
Okay.
you go.
That better? Oh,
You're good. We got your head.
okay.
You know, some people they want when they do interviews on shows, they cover their faces, and the voices. They don't want to be recognized. We want you recognized. So get
Oh,
some.
thank you. Yes. No,
Yeah,
I
that's
I refuse to hide in the shadows.
no,
So,
he's definitely an activist. It's not like it was in the 80s and 90s with everybody screaming. That's why I hope this show, I know this show is going to be breaking barriers and removing stigmas and going to go national at some point because we are telling stories about real people in real life and what they're dealing with. And HIV is out there. We're going to keep it out there. And you can tell your friends they want to be on a show, tell where you work. Come on, click on that link. Be a guest. We want your story because your story might change when it eventually airs. We'll notify you, but eventually, your story could save a life. Your story is about activism. Your story is motivating that even at your age and all you've been through, you don't stop. And thank you for liking Positively Positive because I've wanted this show for over 20 years, but I couldn't fit it with the right people and it wasn't the right time. And then Richardo comes along and I'm on his podcast a couple of times. I said, I want this show called Positively Positive. Next, he says, well, go for it. Boom. I don't have any clue about what I'm doing except I love interviewing people. So it's big time, and you are big time. But tell me, are you in a relationship or you're done with it?
I am not currently in a relationship, but I'm not done with it, or at least I hope I'm not done with it. For several years after Bill passed away, I didn't consider, and I was still too wounded to even consider having another relationship. But it has been a while now, and I don't see any reason to deny myself the possibility of having that kind of intimacy and that kind of love in my life.
And Michael, a big part of it is intimacy and sex don't go together many times. I think back up against me just a little bit more. Stay back there in that light. I want to
Okay.
see. Sit up and sip it. The main that there you were. You're perfect. The other thing was, and that's what the show is so real about. We didn't even have an issue today. This is so amazing. That see these interviews, some of them go so perfectly, and then others I'm gone for 5 minutes and people can look at the show and go, they don't know what they're doing. Of course, we know what we're doing. We're positively positive. But I know with Jeffrey too, after he died, I didn't want to go through anymore. I don't, dating, no intimacy. I don't want, but intimacy, we became more intimate when I chose in 1981 an abstinent sexual relationship because of his promiscuity. We became more intimate with the sexual component removed because we talked more, we held more, we cried more, we loved more. We were never so close as when he was even ill. So I don't think sex, of which you've probably had a lot of, and Lord knows I've been through triple digits, but sex and intimacy don't go together.
They can at times, but they don't always have to be. They don't always end up being coherent. Um, but I, as I said, I don't I don't plan to deny myself that possibility. If it happens, I am open to it. Um, I also, for a long time, I would consider having sex or having a relationship with anyone else who wasn't also living with HIV. But I've changed my mind about that too. It's hard enough to find someone who I don't want to strangle and who doesn't want to strangle me. Um, it's hard enough to find someone, whether you call it a soulmate, a life mate, a partner, whatever. it's hard enough to find someone else that you click with. I'm not going to limit that possibility to only someone else who's living with HIV.
Right. And that's so important because I think it's so interesting how people just meet and you know it's going to be something or it isn't. But even under normal circumstances, of which I don't ever think normal anymore, I have no clue what normal even means. But I think even under the best of circumstances, or whether you're on Matches, Match.com, all these .com dating sites, just in general, I think relationships today must be awful challenging to meet someone that you really like after 6 months and you get to know them. So under normal circumstances, it's hard. Can you imagine that if you're dealing with something like, well, I'm HIV positive and this is the way it is, either like me or you don't. Right up front, give it to them. If they like it, fine. If they don't, walk.
Absolutely. I mean, I that issue of disclosure is one that I talk about with clients and patients all the time, especially with the newly diagnosed folks. And I don't dictate how anyone else should approach it, but for me, before we ever go on a date, the other person is going to know that I'm living with HIV. In fact, if they talk to me for more than 5 minutes, they're probably already aware of it. And it's, it's something that I can't change, so I'm not going to hide it. And either you can deal with that, or you can learn to deal with that, or you can't. And then I don't have time for you.
Yeah. You have a passion in your belly also to keep HIV out there in Charleston and beyond. And if a person also wants to be with someone, they have to bring something to your table. As a widow, 30 years I'm a widow. And unless someone would have come along who could add more to my life, I already have, let's say a goal to see my story made into a series because it's amazing. Committed to Love could be the greatest love story that's been done in decades. And when you have goals, tell that person right up front, unless you can go along with me at a certain point in your life when you're really young, maybe you don't deal with it that way. You're in love and the bells and whistles are going off and your high as a kite. But as you get older, it's different. If you can't add something to my life that's going to go with me because I have this passion and I'm involved with this, then you're not with me at all. And I'm not going to 6 months from now have you say, I don't know you. You've changed. No, you just didn't want to hear those little words the first time I mentioned them.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, so much of my life and my time and my energy is taken up with HIV, both my full-time job and my activism and advocacy work. So anyone that wants to engage in a relationship with me would absolutely have to be willing to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then, at this point, we absolutely know how to prevent transmission of HIV. So that's not even a worry for me anymore. We have the incredible science behind U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable. We have PrEP, we have pre-exposure prophylaxis medication. We have condoms, which have always been around, and they are effective. They're not, many people don't like them, and I can understand that. I don't personally like them very much either. But HIV shouldn't be an impediment to engaging in a relationship because we know how not to transmit it.
Right. Michael, when COVID hit, that's when I was going to write a book, because I will be writing a book on Positively Positive. That's why I have all my notes on my guests, who are amazing. And I'm counting on you to send a friend over too, because you networking like you do There's
Yes.
always someone who again says, you've got to be on this show. And that's what's been wonderful is that we have people telling people. And even though your show may not air, you are being recorded and you will be airing and notified when you're going to be on. But you are with a circle of people who probably said, oh, I would love to be on that show and be interviewed and tell them about it. Yes, you would, because together, as it says on the screen, together in the fight to end HIV/AIDS. We are a team. We are a sisterhood and a brotherhood. We are not perfect, but we are so full of love to want to see people helped and get to the right resources. That's
Mhm.
what's so important because you're an excellent facilitator. You're an excellent speaker.
Well, thank you.
Yes, you are. Next time I want a big light bulb over your head, though.
Yeah,
You hear the music? It's time
I
to
do.
wrap up. You hear that? I love it. And it's so soft and mellow. And again, I am so appreciative of this opportunity to interview you, to talk to you, not interview, to tell your story, to see you and as best I can, and to be a part of what we're doing at Positively Positive because we care. We genuinely, Richardo Jackson has been out in the field for years doing what he does at Campbell Health Solutions. He should be getting a gold medal for the tireless work he does.
Mhm.
And people like you and my other guests and people who really want to see the media, the real media, not just talk about war and this and that. Talk about AIDS once in a while, will you please?
Absolutely.
How
Uh,
about people talk about HIV and that it's not a death sentence? And you know what? There are a lot of people living with it who want to tell their stories about it. And we need to talk about it nationally and have some interviews with people who really are in this for decades. And I think your type of story is exactly what the news media needs to have, this type of a show.
I'm happy to send some folks your way to do more interviews, and I'd love to talk to you again another time.
Yeah, I think what Richardo wanted to do at some point was have kind of a group Zoom, maybe have half a dozen or whenever he figured, maybe November, December, people together in a cluster. We would do a community Zoom one. That would be really great.
That sounds great.
But he's so passionate and he's so wonderful. And I'm just so thank God that we stayed like this. And I've had to learn a lot about I've been in a cocoon in some ways because after Jeff died, I did have the resources and time, and I still do. I'm grateful to have time and the resources to do whatever I'm supposed to go and do all that. But I really think that people have to not expect perfection in life because you will be gravely disappointed.
Oh, yeah.
And you're an example of someone who agreed with that. You did not let HIV and AIDS and the death of a loved person, you didn't let that stop you. It threw you into it more. So thank you so much for being our guest tonight. And we will talk again. And when your friends want to be on, you send them that link that you've got about a dozen times now. You just send that link, let them click on it, and they're on this show. And I'm grateful.
It's been great talking to you. And I look forward to talking to you again. I'd love to do a group Zoom sometime.
Wouldn't that be fun?
I think it would.
Yeah, we will. And as I said, we should be seeing our producer come back soon. But anyway, I've been interviewing Michael Luciano, and we can get in touch with you through your Facebook page, which says "Silence equals death" is your profile picture.
At the moment, yes, that's frequently my profile picture. Occasionally, I actually stick my face up there, but
Okay. But it's Michael Luciano on Facebook is where they can reach you and see your background and read all
yes,
about you.
absolutely.
Did you ever think you'd go back into chemical engineering or anthropology?
Definitely not the chemical engineering. Although the one thing that degree taught me was that it made me not afraid to learn how to read the medical journals that my doctors read and how
Okay.
to follow the studies and the research in HIV.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so there was a lot that I learned from that, but I don't ever want to be a chemical engineer.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I'm going to say so long for a little while. I don't know where he is, but we'll just keep going until all of a sudden we're cut off. That's how it works. Or
okay.
we see his little face pop up. But
Okay.
anyway,